Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. I'm not sure how long this is going to be, but I got about a 9-minute video clip that I'm going to be finishing this video with. And today we are going to talk about ancient America again, but not a specific site, but a whole region. And this is the Four Corners area of Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. And there are a few different ancient sites in here. There are a few different ancient areas in here. One is Mesa Verde National Park. Another one located right down here is Chaco Canyon. And I want to mention this, Geocosmic Rex, who features Randall Carlson's work, just in the last day, they have put out some videos here. One on Chaco Canyon, where Randall really goes into the ancient astronomers that were living here about 1,000 years ago, and I thought it was an excellent video. I will leave the link for this full video below. Now, a couple of the other sites I'm going to talk about is Canyon in this area, in San Canyon Pueblo. And we're going to get a look at some sites here in that lecture. Now, Mesa Verde National Park has a lot of ancient ruins in them, but this is probably the most impressive area right here. And underneath this cliff face here, I imagine to give them plenty of protection from the hot summer sun. Here is another look at these buildings. And here is some sort of ceremonial rock art put in this kiva, it looks like. And the kiva, in that lecture, he's going to talk about the symbolic significance of the kiva. And it fits right into other videos I have talked about from around the world, actually. But pretty impressive ruins found throughout the park. And here is one of those kivas, and these were very important. Now here's a ceremonial structure at a point, and I made a video about this, I think about 3 years ago. We have 3 kivas, or circular structures here, and people have theorized that those are in the image of Orion's belt. Is that correct? Well, it's a possibility for sure. And here we're going to get a look at Canyon de Chelly. This is Spider Rock. This is over 700 feet tall. I think this is the main structure, geological structure, that is known in the park. Here are some ruins in the rock face. Some more ruins. You can barely see them in there. That'll give you a look at how massive some of these rock walls are. Here's a look at the beautiful scenery coming from this canyon. Green down here. Imagine there's water flowing at certain times. Another look at the canyon. Some more ruins. Colorful rock wall here. More ruins built in at the bottom of this rock wall. But this canyon is full of archaeological sites. And I will leave a few links below, but certainly not one of the more well-known ancient sites, but one of the more beautiful ones we have in the United States for sure. Here is an overview, but this area definitely hints of ancient flooding, that is for sure. But as far as beautiful places, Canyon de Chelly, well, I think it's pretty spectacular, and I'd like to visit here someday. But that's a look at Spider Rock, the beautiful scenery in this area. But I imagine the early explorers that were here in the 1800s were awestruck by this canyon and what they found. But there is some documentation of the history here by early explorers. Now, one of the sites that's talked about in the lecture that's coming up the end is San Canyon Pueblo. And this is a really impressive ancient site that really has been deteriorated to almost nothing today. But there are some remains here, and what he shows in the recreation of what it looked like originally is very impressive. Now, here are some remains of San Canyon Pueblo, but he talks about this site in the lecture. Now, another site in the Four Corners area is the Hovenweep National Monument, and here it is in this area right here. We'll take a look at some pics here. Now here are some of the buildings at Hovenweep. This is not a very well-known site, but they had some pretty impressive structures here. Here, circular towers, I'm sure were used for astronomical observations, built perched up here. Here are some more ruins at Hovenweep. And I mentioned this briefly in a compilation video from about 3 years ago. But Hovenweep, looking a lot like the ruins of Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde. One big area here. And of course, probably the most famous site in the region is Chaco Canyon. And this is a look at it here. And I made this video a few years ago, Is Chaco Canyon a Mystery? And I ended it with a lecture from Southwest Archaeology. But some important things are brought up in this video. So I'm not going to talk a lot about Chaco Canyon in this video, but I will leave this link below. And also that video from Geocosmic Rex. But I'm going to end it with a clip taken from about an hour lecture, about an 8 or 9 minute clip that I edited together. It's just an interesting talk on migration and other things having to do with these sites here in the Four Corners region. It's a talk from Southwest Archaeology, and I will leave the full link for the full lecture below. I think they have a great channel, but there are some really cool ruins in this part of the country. That's why I feature it. Check out that Geocosmic Rex video. But I just hope you thought this was interesting, and you all have a very nice day.
When Europeans, Anglo-Europeans came into the Four Corners area in the late 19th century, they were in awe of these large, empty cities or towns, Cliff Palace being the most famous one. This is a photograph taken in 1891 by a guy named Nordenskiöld. Today, of course, Mesa Verde National Park is the iconic visitor attraction for southwestern archaeology. Hundreds of thousands of people troop through Mesa Verde National Park and visit these amazingly well-preserved cliff dwellings dating to the AD 1200s, which people left, as Bill pointed out. The last people probably left or didn't survive there around 1280. So between about the, say, 1240 and 1280, you have a very substantial migration of people out of the area. So the question is, where did they go? Why did they leave? Just a quick review here. Here's 1250 to 1300. Lots of people in the Four Corners area. They're gone by 1300, really by 1300. Things rock along here, 1350 to 1400. Big concentrations down here in the desert, Mogollon Rim, upper Little Colorado. Here's Hopi, here's Zuni, here's the Rio Grande. Then there's another big break in 1400, 1450. The Mogollon Rim country goes down. Again, here's a bigger scale map. Here's the San Juan River. The San Juan drainage was kind of a core of early farming populations. It has some distinctive cultural characteristics, some of which I'll mention a little later. It's Peter Pino at Cliff Palace giving a presentation, talking to a group from Crow Canyon Center. Most of the Pueblo groups have, all of the Pueblo groups I think have some stories about having an ancestry up in the San Juan, and often in the northern San Juan, the Mesa Verde region. The larger settlements in the early to mid to late 1200s were at the heads of canyons, often around springs. This is an artist's reconstruction of San Canyon Pueblo, where the Crow Canyon Center worked for years in the 1990s. It's about 400 rooms, about 90 kivas. It has some interesting, what we would call public architecture. This is a big D-shaped building. Here's a great kiva. There's a plaza. And there's a little area, there's a room block that looks like it's a storage complex, whereas most people in this culture were storing their own food in their own household storerooms. The archaeological evidence is absolutely clear that people were cooking, eating, probably sleeping there. In many cases, these late sites, there aren't even hearths in the surface rooms. So they're really pit houses with ritual features. Analog might be the Navajo hogan, which is a living structure, but it's built to a ritual prescription. And that's where you have to have certain kinds of ceremonies, because it's how Changing Woman told people how to build their houses. And they're spaces that are sacred as well as domestic. Here's another reconstruction, computer reconstruction of San Canyon Pueblo. Again, you can see these things that look like sundials or whatever. These are supposed to be the roofs of kivas with ladders sticking out, so the shadow gets cast across the roof. So you can see how many of these kivas there are. The typical ratio in these late sites is about 1 kiva for every 4 or 5 associated surface rooms. Okay, climate change. A.E. Douglas in the 1920s recognized there was a tree ring signal. He was the inventor of tree ring dating, and recognized a signal of a big drought starting in 1276. He called it the Great Drought, and wrote in National Geographic, one of the all-time great titles for an article, Secrets of the Southwest Solved by Talkative Tree Rings. You know, it's a great title. Well, it turns out that drought is there, but it was part of what climatologists call a mega drought. Covered a huge area. This hot red blob here shows that. Covered the whole middle and western part of the country. So it was a serious drought. But however, no more serious than the one in the mid-1100s that people in the Mesa region had made their way through. You know, they were not probably growing much at that time, but they got through it. Some of the things that didn't make the trip, this is a big D-shaped building at Mesa Verde, towers, classic Mesa Verde black and white pottery design, mugs, so-called kiva jars, and oddly enough, a particular kind of scraper made from a deer bone. It's hard to see that as being of ceremonial or social organization importance, but they just don't show up much outside the San Juan drainage. Small household kivas, I think that was a big change. The individual households giving up their access to the ultimate sacred symbols. The kiva represents the ultimate Pueblo origin story of the emergence of people from below. They have sipapus. These are places undoubtedly where important ceremonies were performed. So anyway, I think that in the wake of these migrations, Pueblo communities of the northern Rio Grande and elsewhere developed ways to hold larger communities together without a strong central authority. Lexon argues that a lot of this is in reaction to whatever it was that was Chaco. It was too hierarchical. Some people had too much power, set themselves above everyone else. So I'll close here with a quote from Tessie, who are not surprised about movement. Movement is part of us. People have moved from place to place and have joined and separated again throughout our past, and we've incorporated it into our songs, stories, and myths, because we must continually remember that without movement, there is no life. So movement is life. That's it. Thank you.